Chapter 1. The World According to Emily. Benjamin Cook had learned 3 immutable truths about life since becoming a father, or rather, an uncle with a permanent promotion. First, coffee wasn't a drink anymore. It was intravenous courage. Second, silence from a 4-year-old was not peace, but a prelude to disaster. And third, no amount of engineering expertise could outthink a determined preschooler armed with crayons and a moral compass forged entirely from cartoons. This morning, all 3 truths collided. Pearl's not eating her breakfast again, Emily announced from the kitchen floor, where she sat cross-legged beside the black cat glaring at her food dish as though it had personally offended her. Benjamin, halfway through spreading peanut butter on a piece of toast, sighed. Maybe Pearl's not hungry. Emily looked at him, eyes wide and serious, her little brow wrinkling. That's not it. She's sad. She misses mommy and daddy. Benjamin froze, the knife hovering over the toast. The kitchen's hum, the refrigerator, the clink of the spoon in Emily's cereal bowl filled the space between them. He forced a small, warm smile. Maybe. Or maybe she just doesn't like the brand I bought. Cats are picky. Emily considered this, then nodded. Okay, but I'm gonna feed her anyway. And just like that, she bounced back into the bubble of childhood, humming as she pushed pieces of kibble around the dish. Benjamin let out a quiet breath, the air leaving his lungs like a slow leak in a balloon. Some mornings it hit him all over again. How his sister should be the one kneeling there. How Jackson should be grumbling about traffic while pouring coffee. How Emily should still have her world intact. But instead, she had him. Benjamin Cook, the 42-year-old accidental father, with a cat that hated him and a to-do list longer than his sleep schedule. He leaned against the counter and glanced at the time on the microwave. 7:48 a.m. If they didn't leave in 7 minutes, he'd be late for the morning team call, and Charles, his boss, the kindly patriarch of the lab, would notice. Emily, shoes on, he called. I can't find my left one, she yelled back from the living room. It's in the toy bin. No, it's not. He walked in and, without even looking, lifted a small unicorn plushie, revealing a pink sneaker beneath. He raised an eyebrow. Emily blinked, then giggled. Oh, it was hiding. Of course it was. They got out the door with a kind of chaotic grace, the kind that only parents of small children could understand. One hand for the keys, the other for the juice box, and a shoulder to carry everything else. The drive to Little Stars preschool was short. The roads wound through Maplewood's tree-lined neighborhoods, bright with early autumn. Gold and red leaves drifted down like slow confetti, catching the morning light. Emily, strapped into her booster seat, was narrating her life to Pearl, who was safely at home, but somehow remained part of every conversation. And if you were here, Pearl, you'd sit next to me, and we'd share snacks, but you don't like apple slices, and Daddy Ben says no candy before lunch, but maybe for a cat it's okay. Benjamin smiled. Hey, what did we talk about with the Daddy Ben thing? Emily frowned, thinking hard. That your Uncle Ben? He nodded. Right. But, she said, twirling her hair, you're my uncle and my daddy. So, your Uncle Daddy Ben. He groaned. That's worse. Emily laughed so hard she snorted, and he couldn't help but laugh too. When they pulled up to the preschool, she grabbed her backpack and reached for his hand. He took it, her little fingers warm against his, and walked her inside. The teachers waved. Emily ran to hang her coat and turned back to him, suddenly serious. Don't forget to pick me up, as if I'd ever. Last time you were late. I was 2 minutes late, and that was because you said the light was red. He grinned. You remember everything, don't you? Emily beamed, proud. Yup, I got a big brain. Yes, you do, he said softly, kissing her forehead. Have a good day, Peanut. Back in his car, Benjamin sat for a long moment before starting the engine. He was tired, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones, the kind that coffee only negotiates with. His laptop bag sat on the passenger seat, full of code and prototypes and half-finished dreams. He was still an engineer at heart, still chasing that promise to make life easier for people who'd lost something. But now, more than ever, he felt like one of them, trying to build something functional out of the wreckage. He started the car, and as the radio came on, he caught the DJ saying something about an upcoming tech symposium in Chicago, a place where his company's wheelchair assist system would debut in a few weeks. He didn't know that conference would bring April Connors back into his life. Not yet. Right now, all Benjamin Cook cared about was getting to work on time, making enough progress to keep his job secure, and remembering to pick Emily up at exactly 4:30 so she wouldn't lecture him again. Chapter 2. The cat, the conference, and the cup of cold coffee. Benjamin Cook was halfway through his second cup of coffee before he remembered the first one still sat on his desk, cold, untouched, and accusing. He stared at it as though it had betrayed him. Traitor, he muttered. Pearl, perched regally on the windowsill above his workstation, flicked her tail without interest. Benjamin had converted the spare bedroom into a home office after the accident. It looked less like a workspace and more like a tech wizard's lair. A 3D printer in the corner, schematics pinned to corkboards, and a half-assembled mechanical joint that looked like a robot's elbow on the workbench. There was also a pink tiara resting on his keyboard. He sighed. Emily's been redecorating again. He lifted the tiara, smiled faintly, and set it beside a photo of his sister, Deborah. She was laughing in the picture, head tilted, wind in her hair, the kind of joy you can't fake. Hey Deb, he said quietly. Your kid's going to rule the world someday. I just hope I don't screw it up before then. The cat sneezed. Appreciate the confidence, Pearl. He sat down, adjusted his headset, and clicked into the morning video meeting. His boss, Charles Parton, appeared on screen, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, silver hair, and the eternally patient demeanor of someone who'd seen too many prototypes catch fire. Morning, Ben, Charles said. How's our favorite little engineer? She's good. Ate her breakfast, brushed her teeth, fought with the cat, declared herself a superhero. Normal morning. Glad to hear it. And you? Benjamin smiled faintly. Still learning how to keep up. Join the club, Charles chuckled. All right, let's get started. Big week ahead. We're finalizing the demo specs for the Chicago conference. You're still presenting, right? Yes, sir. Good. You've earned it. The board's buzzing about your prototype. Especially the AI adaptive system. They're saying it could change accessibility tech. Benjamin's heart swelled and clenched all at once. He wanted to be proud, but pride always came with guilt these days. I'll make sure it's ready. Ben, Charles said, his voice softening. You've been through hell and back. You're doing good work. Don't forget to breathe. I'll try, Benjamin said with a small smile. Good man. Now, I'll send over the latest schedule. You'll be in Chicago for 5 days, right? Bring Emily if you have to. She's got half the company wrapped around her little finger anyway. Benjamin laughed. She does have that effect. Smart girl. Takes after her uncle. When the call ended, Benjamin leaned back in his chair and stared at the window. Outside, Maplewood was quietly alive. A few leaves drifting across the driveway, a neighbor jogging by with their dog, the hum of a world moving forward. He hadn't left Maplewood for more than a weekend in years. Chicago felt far away, bigger than he remembered cities being. But Charles was right. This was his work, his legacy. He owed it to himself, to his team, and to Deborah. At precisely 3:45 p.m., Benjamin saved his work and closed his laptop. His phone alarm was labeled, "Pick up Emily. Do not be late or face doom." He made it to Little Stars preschool at 4:27. Emily was waiting outside, backpack in hand, pigtails slightly crooked, chatting with her teacher. When she saw him, her face lit up. Uncle Daddy Ben. He winced playfully. We're still working on that name. She grinned. I like it. I know you do. On the drive home, she told him all about her day. The finger paint incident. It wasn't my fault. It was Marcus's sneeze. The snack swap. He gave me grapes for my pretzels. And the new song she learned about friendship. But I forgot all the words except the part about cookies. By the time they got home, she was singing loudly and off-key, and Pearl was waiting at the door, tail flicking with the imperious patience of an overlord. Dinner was simple, grilled cheese and tomato soup, Emily's favorite. Afterward, she played with her dolls while Benjamin cleaned up, humming softly under her breath. Uncle Ben, she asked suddenly, without looking up. Yeah, Peanut. When I grow up, can I be a princess astronaut? He smiled. You can be whatever you want, even if the rocket's pink. Especially if it's pink. She nodded solemnly. Good. 'Cause only real princess astronauts have pink rockets. Benjamin chuckled. I'll remember that. After bedtime stories and one extra, just 5 more minutes, plea. Emily finally drifted off to sleep, clutching Pearl like a teddy bear. Benjamin sat on the couch, laptop open, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. But he wasn't working. He was staring at the confirmation email for the Chicago conference. 5 days. 5 days in a city full of memories. He still remembered the last time he was in Chicago. 20 years ago. College. The symposium. April. He could still see her, standing in the rain outside a restaurant. Tears and raindrops mixing on her face as she said goodbye. Different directions, Ben. You've got your dreams, and I've got mine. She had walked away without looking back. He hadn't realized until years later that it wasn't anger that lingered. It was the silence she left behind. He closed his laptop and leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. All right, he murmured to himself. 5 days. What could possibly go wrong? Pearl yawned from her spot on the armrest, unimpressed. Benjamin sighed. Yeah, I don't believe that either. Chapter 3. The Return of April Connors. Benjamin had always thought of conferences as controlled chaos. Endless coffee, too many name tags, and the kind of hotel carpeting that could induce vertigo if you stared at it too long. He hadn't attended one in years. But now, here he was, rolling a suitcase through the gleaming lobby of the Hyatt Regency Chicago. Emily perched happily on top, like a very chatty co-pilot. This place is huge, she exclaimed, eyes wide. It's like a castle. It's a hotel, he corrected gently. But castles have elevators and beds, and people who bring food too, she argued. He smiled. Can't argue with that logic. The truth was, he was just as overwhelmed. The high ceilings, the echo of 100 conversations, the smell of brewed coffee and conference room stress. It was all oddly nostalgic. Charles had insisted that bringing Emily was fine. She'll charm them all, Ben. Half those board members need a dose of real life. He'd packed coloring books, snacks, and a tablet full of cartoons. She'd packed her stuffed rabbit, a toy stethoscope, and the unshakable conviction that she was Benjamin's assistant. They checked in, dropped their bags, and headed straight for the convention center wing. Benjamin's presentation materials had already been shipped, and his booth, a modest display tucked between a flashy drone demo and a biomedical robotics startup, awaited setup. Emily sat cross-legged on the carpet as he unpacked cables. Can I be in charge of stickers? Sure, he said, handing her a stack. Just don't stick them on people. She gave him an angelic smile. Of course not. He didn't believe her for a second. By the afternoon, the conference hall buzzed with activity. Engineers, investors, and executives moved between booths like bees in a very expensive hive. Benjamin adjusted the display screen showing his AI-assisted wheelchair prototype and took a long sip of his third cup of coffee. That's when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Confident, professional, melodic in the way that only one person's could be. Good afternoon, everyone. April Connors, Sterling Dynamics. The name hit him like a glass shattering in his chest. He froze. His hand tightened on the coffee cup, the warmth bleeding through his fingers. Slowly, mechanically, he turned. She stood 20 feet away, surrounded by a small group of executives. Time had done that strange thing where it both changed everything and nothing at all. April looked older, yes, early 40s now, but still unmistakably her. The same soft brown hair, though now cut to a sleek shoulder length. The same spark in her eyes, though tempered with experience. Her posture, her calm confidence, her quiet command of the room, it was all there. And when her gaze swept the hall, briefly, casually, it passed right over him. No flicker of recognition. Just another face in a sea of professionals. Benjamin felt something twist deep inside. A sharp, stupid ache that caught him off guard. He turned away quickly, pretending to fuss with the power cable. Of course, she doesn't remember. It's been 20 years. You're just another guy at another conference. Emily, oblivious, tugged on his sleeve. Uncle Ben, I think I ran out of stickers. Okay, sweetheart, he said softly. Let's go get more. He didn't look back. The next 2 days were a blur of presentations and polite networking. Benjamin delivered his talk with practiced calm, the kind that came from years of pretending to have it all together. His demo ran perfectly, earning nods of approval and murmurs of interest from investors. He should have been thrilled. Instead, every time he crossed paths with April, in a hallway, at a coffee stand, during a Q&A panel, that same hollow feeling settled in his chest. She didn't recognize him. Or maybe she did, and simply didn't care. Either way, it hurt more than he wanted to admit. Emily, however, was having the time of her life. She had become the unofficial mascot of the robotics showcase. Engineers gave her stickers, candy, and in one case, a tiny 3D printed robot she named Mr. Beepy. On the third day, Benjamin decided they'd earned a break. He took Emily to the conference cafe for lunch, a quiet corner table by the windows, far away from the chatter of business lunches. They were mid-debate over whether chocolate or vanilla ice cream was superior when he heard a familiar laugh from the table next to theirs. His stomach dropped. April sat facing him, laughing at something one of her colleagues said. Her eyes sparkled in that way they always had when she was trying to hide her nerves. Benjamin looked down, trying to appear engrossed in his sandwich. But Emily, social butterfly that she was, noticed. Uncle Ben, that lady's looking at you. He glanced up and froze. April's eyes had locked on him. For a moment, confusion flickered across her face. Then, recognition. Her smile faltered. Her hand lowered slowly from her cup. Ben? She whispered, disbelief threading her voice. Benjamin swallowed. Hi, April. The next minute was a lifetime. April stood, almost knocking over her chair, and crossed the space between them. It is you, she said softly. Ben Cook. I can't believe it. He forced a polite smile. Yeah, been a long time. Her eyes darted to Emily. And who's this? My daughter, he said automatically. Emily beamed. Hi, I'm Emily and Cook. I'm 4 3/4. April blinked in surprise. Wow, she's adorable. She knows, Benjamin said dryly, making Emily giggle. April laughed, then hesitated, sensing the invisible wall between them. It's really good to see you, Ben. Yeah, he said. You too. An awkward silence stretched. Then someone called her name from across the room, breaking the moment. April smiled, that practiced, polite smile he remembered from their last night together, and said, maybe we can catch up later? Benjamin nodded, though he already knew he'd do his best to avoid that. Sure. She left, and Emily looked up at him, curious. You know that lady? Benjamin exhaled. Yeah, Peanut. I used to. That night, after Emily fell asleep in their hotel room, Benjamin sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. Chicago glittered beneath him, alive, indifferent, and full of ghosts. He told himself it didn't matter, that people change, that she was a chapter closed long ago. But somewhere in the quiet hum of the city, he couldn't shake the echo of her voice. And for the first time in years, Benjamin Cook felt like the ground beneath his feet wasn't as solid as he thought. Chapter 4. The Things We Don't Say. Benjamin Cook didn't believe in ghosts. Not the sheet-covered kind, at least. He believed in the quieter ones, the ghosts that lived in memory, that spoke in the familiar timbre of a voice you hadn't heard in decades, that wore perfume you hadn't smelled since college, but somehow still recognized instantly in a crowd. And now, here she was, April Connors, haunting the same conference floor as if the last 20 years hadn't happened. It shouldn't have mattered. He had Emily. He had his work. He had closure, or at least, the kind of closure that came from burying your heart under career deadlines and bedtime stories. But every time he glimpsed April across a room, laughing that same laugh or adjusting her glasses the way she used to when she was nervous, he felt that same crack of old longing, sharp, sudden, unwanted. By the fourth morning of the conference, he perfected his strategy, avoidance by precision timing. He checked the schedule, planned his booth breaks during her presentations, and even learned the fastest detour between the robotics wing and the cafeteria. It almost worked. Almost. Emily, however, had other plans. Uncle Ben, she said, tugging at his sleeve as they stood in line for coffee and juice. Can I go say hi to the lady from the lunch place? He blinked. The what? The nice one with the shiny necklace. She smiled at me yesterday. She's right there. He followed Emily's pointing finger, and, sure enough, there was April, standing at the condiment station, pouring cream into her coffee. Emily, wait, too late. Emily had already trotted across the carpet, her pink sneakers squeaking, her pigtails bouncing with every determined step. Hi, she said brightly. I'm Emily again. April turned, startled, then broke into a genuine smile. Oh, hello there, Emily again. Benjamin arrived a second later, equal parts exasperated and resigned. Sorry about that. She's perfect, April said softly. She's perfect, Ben. Emily grinned proudly. I know. Benjamin sighed. Go on, Peanut. Why don't you grab us a table, okay? Can I get a cookie? He hesitated, then nodded. 1 cookie. 2 cookies. 1.5. She squinted at him, considering. Deal. When Emily skipped away, Benjamin and April stood in the lingering wake of her energy, awkward silence expanding between them. April finally broke it. You're really good with her. He shrugged. I've had practice. She's your daughter? He hesitated. There was no easy way to explain that story in a crowded coffee line, but he owed her some truth. My niece, actually. My sister and her husband died. I took her in. April's expression softened immediately. Oh, Ben. I'm so sorry. He nodded once. Thanks. For a moment, neither spoke. Then April said, gently, You look different. He gave a small, wry smile. Older. She laughed quietly. Wiser, maybe. But, yeah, a little older. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the same traces of time on her face. The faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the careful poise that came from living through too much and surviving anyway. You look the same, he said before he could stop himself. April smiled faintly. That's kind of you. I don't feel the same. Neither do I. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Fragile, familiar, full of everything they hadn't said 20 years ago. Then April's phone buzzed. She looked down, sighed, and gave him that apologetic half-smile he remembered all too well. Work never stops. I'm sorry. Maybe we can actually talk later? Without coffee lines or cookies. He hesitated. The safe answer was no. The adult, responsible, emotionally self-preserving answer was definitely no. But instead, he said quietly, sure. Later. Later came faster than he expected. That afternoon, during the final round of demonstrations, April appeared at his booth. She watched quietly as he explained the mechanics of the wheelchair's adaptive AI to a group of investors. When they left, she stayed. That's brilliant, she said softly. It learns from the user? Yeah. Adjusts movement algorithms in real time. Makes slopes, curbs, and uneven terrain easier to handle. Independence with dignity. That's the goal. April smiled. You always wanted to make things that matter. He shrugged. Guess I finally did. There was a beat of silence before she said, I'm sorry, Ben. He froze. For what? For disappearing. For not writing. For pretending it didn't matter when it did. You deserved better than that. The words hung between them. Fragile, sincere. Benjamin took a slow breath. You didn't just disappear, April. You evaporated. One night we were planning life after graduation, and the next you were gone. No call. No letter. Just, he stopped, jaw tightening. Just silence. April looked down. I know. And I hated myself for it for a long time. Why? He asked, his voice quiet but edged. Why walk away like that? She hesitated, searching his face. Because I was scared. Because I knew I wasn't ready to be what you needed. And because long distance never works. Not for people like us. We were both chasing dreams that went in different directions. You could have said that, he said. I know. Her voice broke slightly. I thought it would hurt less if you hated me. Benjamin laughed, a soft, bitter sound. Mission accomplished. April flinched, and he immediately regretted it. Look, he said, exhaling. It was a lifetime ago. I've got Emily now. I've got work. I'm fine. April studied him. You don't have to be fine all the time, you know. He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw it. The exhaustion, the quiet fear, the weight he carried so carefully that most people never noticed. I do, he said simply. She needs me to be. April's throat tightened. Then I'm glad she has you. He nodded, then glanced toward Emily, who was showing Pearl's picture to one of the lab interns. She's everything. April smiled softly. I can see that. There was a long pause. The kind that used to feel comfortable between them, now thick with history. Finally, April said, Ben, I'm really glad I ran into you again. He gave her a small, polite smile. Yeah, me too. She caught the distance in his tone, but didn't push. Instead, she said gently, I'll see you around? Yeah, he said again. See you around. She walked away, and he watched her go. That same measured stride, that same quiet certainty. It hurt less than he expected, but it also hurt more than he wanted. That night, as he tucked Emily into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. Uncle Ben. Yeah, Peanut. Do you like the pretty lady? He blinked. What lady? The one with the shiny necklace. Benjamin smiled faintly. She's an old friend. Emily yawned. She smiled at you like you're her favorite person. He chuckled softly. I doubt that. Emily snuggled deeper under the blanket. I think she's nice. You should be friends again. He brushed her hair back from her forehead and kissed her goodnight. We'll see, sweetheart. When he turned off the light, he whispered to himself, yeah, we'll see. Chapter 5. The Science of Second Chances. The first snow of the season came early to Maplewood that year. Benjamin noticed it one morning as he stood by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the faint flakes drift past the streetlights. Emily was still asleep in her room, Pearl curled at her feet, and for a rare moment the house was completely still. It had been almost 3 months since Chicago. 3 months since April Connors had walked back into his life like a memory he hadn't been ready to remember. He'd gone back to work, buried himself in development again. The prototype had been approved for further funding. New design rounds were in motion. The team was expanding. Life, as it always did, had moved forward. And yet, some nights, when he was too tired to filter his thoughts, he caught himself thinking about her, about how time had shaped them both, about the conversation that hadn't really been an ending or a beginning, just an open space between. By the time Emily woke, the kitchen smelled like waffles. She patted and wearing mismatched socks and one of his old t-shirts that reached her knees. It's snowing, she squealed. Can we make a snowman? Maybe after school, he said, flipping a waffle. And Pearl can help. Pearl doesn't like the cold. Emily gasped dramatically. Then we'll make her a snow cat. Benjamin grinned. That's actually a good idea. That afternoon, he dropped Emily at preschool and headed to the lab. The offices of Parton Robotics were housed in a repurposed brick warehouse, the kind with old beams and new ideas. He'd spent more time here than anywhere else in his adult life. He was halfway through calibrating a servo arm when Charles appeared at the door of his workshop, holding a mug and wearing a smile that usually meant he was about to volunteer Benjamin for something. Morning, Ben. Got a minute? Benjamin glanced up, already wary. Do I have a choice? Charles chuckled. Not really. He stepped in, leaning against the doorframe. So, the boards decided to bring in a corporate liaison from Sterling Dynamics to oversee integration with our AI module. They're backing a big chunk of funding for Phase 2. Benjamin nodded slowly. Makes sense. Do we know who they're sending? Charles grinned, almost sheepishly. That's the thing. You've met her before. Benjamin frowned. Who? April Connors. The wrench in his hand slipped, clattering onto the table. You're kidding. I wish I was, Charles said, chuckling. Small world, huh? Benjamin exhaled through his nose, rubbing the back of his neck. You could say that. Look, Charles said, more gently. I know you've got history, but she's good. Sharp. The board loves her. And she's on your side. She pushed for this project, apparently. Said it was one of the best designs she's seen in years. Benjamin blinked. She said that. Word for word. So maybe cut her some slack, eh? Start fresh. Benjamin looked back down at his workstation. Yeah, fresh start. He didn't sound convinced. April arrived the following Monday. Benjamin spotted her through the glass conference room window before she saw him. She was standing beside Charles, shaking hands with one of the junior engineers, professional as ever. She looked different here, in this smaller space, less untouchable, somehow. Her blazer was dusted with snowflakes, her hair slightly wind-tousled from the walk-in. When she turned and saw him standing in the doorway, her smile faltered, then softened into something more cautious, almost hopeful. Ben, she said, walking over. Hi. April, he replied, polite but measured. Welcome to Maplewood. It's beautiful here, she said. I haven't seen snow like this in years. Give it a week. You'll be over it. She laughed, and for a heartbeat the sound carried him straight back to college, to late nights in the philosophy building, their hands stained with highlighter ink, arguing over whether free will existed. Charles clapped his hands together. Good. You two know each other. Saves me introductions. April's got full board clearance, so she'll be observing all prototype development and progress reporting. Treat her like part of the team. Got it, Benjamin said. April smiled. Thanks, Charles. I promise I won't get in the way. Oh, you'll do fine, Charles said, already heading for the door. Ben here's only a little grumpy before his third cup of coffee. When he was gone, they stood there for a moment, both unsure where to start. So, April said finally, this is your kingdom. Benjamin glanced around the lab, cluttered desks, half-assembled parts, sticky notes on monitors. More like my chaos. I like it, she said, and meant it. He nodded toward the workstation. You'll want to see the adaptive controller interface. That's what we're working on today. Lead the way. The day passed slowly, marked by polite professionalism and unspoken tension. April asked smart questions, took notes, and watched the tests with genuine interest. Benjamin, for his part, focused on the work, or tried to. Every now and then, though, he caught her watching him, eyes full of something he couldn't quite name. At lunch, she followed him to the break room. So, she said, pouring herself tea, how's Emily? He blinked, surprised she remembered the name. She's great. Preschool, snowman plans, pink rocket ambitions. Keeps me busy. April smiled. She reminds me of you. He snorted. God help her. April laughed, then her tone softened. You're a good dad, Ben. He shrugged. Trying. You're doing more than trying. She hesitated, looking at her tea. You've always been like that. When you care, you give everything. He didn't answer. The silence stretched again, heavy but not hostile. After a moment, she said quietly, I know you probably don't believe it, but I'm really proud of you. Of what you've built. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw sincerity in her eyes. Not pity, not nostalgia, just truth. Thanks, he said finally. That means more than you think. By the end of the week, the tension had softened. April fit in well with the team. She was sharp, diplomatic, and funny in small, unexpected ways, the kind of humor that slipped out when she wasn't trying to be impressive. Emily, naturally, adored her. When Benjamin brought his daughter by the lab on Friday, her field trip day, April immediately knelt to greet her. Hi again, Emily, she said warmly. I heard you made a snow cat. Emily beamed. We did. His name is Snow Pearl, and he's very handsome. April laughed. I bet he is. Emily tilted her head. You should come help next time. You can make the snow nose. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. The what now? The snow nose, Emily said solemnly. The most important part. April smiled. Then I'd be honored. Benjamin tried not to smile, and failed. That evening, after Emily fell asleep, he sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out before him but untouched. He'd told himself he could keep things professional, that April's presence didn't mean anything more than old history and shared work. But as he sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the heater and the faint wind against the windows, he realized something had shifted. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something quieter, something like forgiveness beginning to thaw. He wasn't sure if he was ready for it, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't immediately turn away. Chapter 6. Snow Pearl and the Space Station. Maplewood woke up buried under 8 inches of snow. Benjamin woke up to a 4-year-old standing on his bed announcing it like a breaking news reporter. It's a snow day, Emily shouted, jumping up and down. No school, no work, no socks. Pearl, displeased, launched herself from the blankets and disappeared down the hall. Benjamin groaned, one arm over his eyes. No socks, huh? No socks ever again. He laughed, giving up. All right, Commander Sockless. Let's see the damage. Outside, the world had gone still and bright. Trees sagged under powder, roofs wore thick white hats, and the street was silent except for the scrape of one lonely shovel somewhere down the block. Emily was already pressing her nose to the window. We have to make another Snow Pearl, she said. This time with a tail. The last one didn't have a tail. We'll see what we can do, Benjamin said. And can April help? He blinked. April. She said she wanted to make the snow nose. You promised. He rubbed the back of his neck, remembering the offhand joke from the week before. That was a figure of speech, Peanut. Emily folded her arms with dramatic seriousness. You shouldn't break promises. He sighed. Okay, fine. But April probably has work. I'm gonna ask her, Emily declared, already marching toward the phone on the counter. Before he could protest, she pressed the speaker button. Call Miss April. He covered his face with his hands as the line rang. A moment later, hello? Hi. It's me, Emily. It's a snow day? You have to come make Snow Pearl too. Benjamin mouthed a silent apology toward no one. On the other end, April laughed, a real laugh, light and surprised. Well, good morning, Emily. Snow Pearl too, huh? What happened to the first one? He melted. But this one's gonna be better. With a tail. Benjamin leaned in. Sorry about this, April. Don't be. She interrupted, still smiling through the speaker. I was just looking for an excuse not to answer emails. What time should I come by? Benjamin blinked. You're actually coming? Of course. A promise is a promise, right, Emily? Right. Benjamin sighed, defeated. I'll make cocoa. She arrived an hour later in jeans, boots, and a bright red scarf that made the snow look even whiter. Emily met her at the door like she was a celebrity. You came. Wouldn't miss it, April said, crouching to zip up the little girl's coat. We've got snow noses to sculpt. Benjamin handed her a mug of cocoa. You know you just doomed yourself to a day of frostbite and glitter. She smiled over the rim of the mug. I've survived board meetings. I'll manage. Out in the yard, they worked side by side. Emily rolled the first ball of snow with intense focus, while Benjamin and April shaped the body. Their gloves brushed once, just a quick, accidental touch, but it sent a flicker of warmth up his arm that had nothing to do with the weather. April noticed too. He saw it in the way her eyes darted away, the small, nervous smile she hid behind her scarf. So, she said, scooping more snow, when's the launch of the pink rocket? Benjamin laughed. Next week, apparently. We're still working on the royal funding. April grinned. Tell her I'll invest. I have experience in princess startups. They both laughed, the kind of easy laughter that used to come naturally. For a few minutes, they weren't two people with history. They were just two adults trying to make a snow cat for a kid who believed in impossible things. When Emily proudly announced that Snow Pearl 2 was finished, complete with button eyes, twig tail, and a carrot nose that drooped comically, April insisted on photos. Benjamin took a few with Emily in the middle, April's arm around her shoulders. Then Emily demanded, now one of you two. Benjamin hesitated. Maybe. But April handed Emily the phone, smiling. Come on, Ben. For the record. They stood close. Closer than they needed to. The cold air smelled faintly of snow and her perfume, the same kind she'd worn in college. The photo clicked, and for a split second, everything else faded. Afterward, they retreated inside, red-cheeked and laughing. Emily immediately began constructing a space station out of couch cushions while April and Benjamin thawed out in the kitchen. She's incredible, April said, watching Emily through the doorway. She keeps me on my toes. I can see that. April smiled, then turned serious. You're good with her. She's lucky. He shook his head. I'm the lucky one. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the hum of the kettle and Emily's muffled singing about space cats and princess rockets. April looked at him then, really looked. I missed this, she said softly. He met her gaze. Snow days. Her smile was sad and genuine. You know what I mean. He wanted to say something. Something light, or maybe something honest, but Emily's voice interrupted. We need more astronauts. April laughed and stood. Duty calls. Benjamin watched her kneel among the cushions, laughing as Emily explained the complicated rules of zero-gravity pillow travel. And he realized, with a quiet ache, that the wall he'd built around his heart had a few cracks in it now. That night, after April left and Emily was asleep, Benjamin scrolled through the photos on his phone. There it was, the picture Emily had taken. He and April, shoulder to shoulder, snow in their hair, both smiling like they hadn't in years. He should have deleted it. Instead, he set the phone down carefully, looked out the window at the fading snow cat in the yard, and whispered, Your trouble, April Connors. But the smile that followed betrayed him. Chapter 7. The gravity between us. Benjamin Cook believed in three things: caffeine, deadlines, and the power of duct tape to fix most of life's problems. He'd never found a brand strong enough, however, to hold together the mess in his chest every time April Connors smiled at him. It had been 3 weeks since the snow day. 3 weeks of casual run-ins that Emily swore were accidents, but somehow always happened when April stopped by the lab. 3 weeks of texts about project updates that somehow turned into jokes, and jokes that turned into fragments of the past neither of them had dared mention before. Now they were standing shoulder to shoulder in Lab 2, a sterile room full of half-finished prototypes and the faint smell of solder. The hum of machinery filled the air, steady as a heartbeat. April's tablet glowed with lines of code. Your assistant's behavioral loop is still freezing during the obstacle test, she said, tapping the screen. It's like it keeps forgetting what it just learned. Benjamin sighed. The irony of an AI with short-term memory loss is not lost on me. She smirked. Maybe it's overworked. Like someone else I know. Cute, he said, but his mouth twitched into a smile. It's probably a simple logic bug. I'll run a full debug cycle. I could help, she offered. My degree wasn't in programming, but I've picked up enough to be dangerous. He raised an eyebrow. Dangerous is exactly the word I'd use. April gave him a mock glare, then leaned over the workstation beside him. The space between them shrank to inches. He caught the faint scent of snow and coffee that had somehow become her scent to him. Crisp, familiar, and impossible to ignore. She pointed at the screen. If it's misreading input from the distance sensors, it might be skipping the conditionals entirely. Try isolating that subroutine. Benjamin looked at her, surprised. You've been studying my code. She shrugged. Occupational hazard. I like knowing what I'm talking about before I report to the board. He smiled faintly. Always the overachiever. You say that like it's a bad thing. I used to think it was. The words came out before he could stop them. April looked up, expression softening. You never liked sitting still? You were always building something. I admired that. He wanted to tell her that he'd only ever built things to fill the silence she left behind, but he didn't. Instead, he said, You still have the worst timing. I've been told. They shared a quiet laugh. Then Emily's voice echoed faintly from the office down the hall, singing something about Pearl being a galactic space cat, and the tension between them broke into an easy warmth. Later that evening, they were the last two left in the lab. Emily had fallen asleep on the office couch with Pearl curled up beside her, and the world outside was dark and wet, rain tracing soft lines down the windows. Benjamin rubbed his eyes. You should go home. It's late. So should you, April said. She leaned against the table, arms crossed. You've been running on fumes all week. He shrugged. Work doesn't care if I'm tired. I do. The room went still. April blinked, then looked away, embarrassed. I just mean, you push yourself too hard. You always have. He nodded, unsure what to say. Comes with the territory. She hesitated. You don't have to do everything alone, you know. He glanced toward Emily, sleeping peacefully. Yeah, I do. April followed his gaze, her expression softening. She's amazing, Ben. You're doing an incredible job with her. She deserves better. No, April said firmly. She deserves you. And Deborah would agree. Hearing his sister's name spoken aloud after so long hit him like a physical ache. April must have seen it, because she stepped closer, her voice gentle. You're honoring them every day you show up for her. Benjamin swallowed hard. Some days, I'm just holding it together with tape and caffeine. Then maybe it's time someone else held it with you. Her hand brushed his. A light, hesitant touch. He didn't move away. The rain whispered against the glass. The lab's low hum filled the silence between them, the kind that said everything words couldn't. He looked down at their joined hands and realized how long it had been since someone had touched him without asking for something in return. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. April. She smiled faintly, eyes shining. You don't have to say anything. He shook his head. That's the problem. I've wanted to say something for 20 years. Her breath caught. Ben, before she could finish, Emily stirred on the couch and sat up groggily. Daddy, she mumbled. Can we go home? The spell broke. April stepped back quickly, cheeks flushed. Benjamin cleared his throat, forcing a steady voice. Yeah, Peanut. Let's go home. He gathered Emily in his arms, Pearl meowing in protest as he lifted her blanket too. When he turned back, April was already packing up her tablet. Good night, April, he said quietly. She met his eyes. Good night, Ben. As he carried Emily out into the rain, he couldn't help glancing back through the glass door. April was still standing there, watching him go, her reflection blurred in the window. Two silhouettes divided by a pane of glass, and 20 years of unfinished words. That night, when Benjamin finally tucked Emily in, she mumbled sleepily, "Miss April's nice." He brushed her hair back. "Yeah," he whispered. "She is. Do you like her?" He smiled. "Get some sleep, astronaut." But long after Emily's breathing slowed and the house went quiet, Benjamin sat awake on the couch, staring at the rain outside, and thinking that maybe, just maybe, gravity was pulling him towards something he wasn't sure he could resist anymore. Chapter 8. Things we don't say. Monday mornings at the lab were usually Benjamin's favorite kind of chaos, organized enough to feel productive, messy enough to prove something real was being built. But not this Monday. He walked into the main conference room with a folder in one hand and a cold dread in his chest. April was already there, scrolling through her tablet with the kind of focus that meant something had gone very, very wrong. "Morning," he said carefully. She looked up. "We have a problem." He had a feeling she wasn't talking about the coffee machine. April turned the tablet around. The board reviewed the last funding report. Someone upstairs decided to optimize the project timeline. "They're cutting your testing phase in half." Benjamin blinked. "Half? They want a live demo in 3 weeks. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "We're still stabilizing the control feedback. The AI loop isn't ready for field use yet." "I know." "Then tell them that." "I did," April said, voice tight. "They told me to make it happen anyway. They think you're being overly cautious." He laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Right? Because rushing safety-critical tech always goes great." "Ben, no," he interrupted, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not going to sign off on that. Not when this thing is supposed to help people walk again. We don't get second chances if it fails." April's eyes softened, but there was steel underneath. "Then we have to convince them. Together." He exhaled, shoulders dropping. "You really think they'll listen?" "They'll have to," she said. "We'll make them." Later that morning, Emily arrived with her coloring book and Pearl in tow. She was spending the day at the lab since daycare had closed early for repairs. April sat beside her in the office while Benjamin prepared data for the upcoming call with the board. Emily glanced up from her coloring page. "Miss April." "Yes, sweetheart." "Are you and Daddy fighting?" April froze mid-sentence. "What makes you say that?" "You sound like my teacher when she says she's not mad. She's just disappointed." April blinked, then laughed quietly. "You're too smart for your own good. You know that." Emily grinned. "Daddy says it's genetic." "Well," April said, smiling, "he might be right." From across the room, Benjamin called. "What's she saying about me?" "That you're a genius," April replied. "Good answer." Emily whispered conspiratorially. "He's not really a genius. He can't even braid hair right." April bit her lip to hide her laughter. "That's okay. I can teach him. Promise." April nodded solemnly. "Promise." The conference call that afternoon was a battle from the first word. The board members were polite but skeptical, nodding through Benjamin's presentation with the detached interest of people who had already made up their minds. When he finished, the chairman said, "Mr. Cook, we appreciate your dedication, but the projections don't justify another delay." Benjamin clenched his jaw. "With respect, these are not just projections. These are people. If we rush deployment, someone could get hurt." April jumped in before anyone could respond. "The long-term viability of this project depends on user trust. If the prototype fails publicly, the fallout could cost us far more than a few weeks." The chairman frowned. "Ms. Connors, our investors." "With all due respect," April cut in, voice sharp as glass. "Our investors don't have to look the people in the eye who'll rely on this tech to stand up and walk." The room went silent. Benjamin stared at her, momentarily stunned. April sat straight-backed, fire in her eyes. The chairman cleared his throat. "Will, take your concerns under advisement." The call ended soon after, leaving only the hum of the air conditioner. Benjamin turned to April. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He smiled, small and genuine. "You were terrifying." "I know. You were also amazing." April's mouth curved upward. "I've been called worse." That evening, the lab was quiet again. Emily was sprawled on the floor, constructing what she insisted was a moon habitat out of paper cups and tape. Pearl supervised from a safe distance. Benjamin leaned against the table beside April, both sipping lukewarm coffee. "You were right," he said finally. "They needed to hear it from someone who speaks their language." April shrugged modestly. "You'd have done the same." He looked at her, eyes warm. "No, I'd have sent them an angry email and regretted it later." She laughed, the sound soft and tired. "Then maybe that's why we work well together." He studied her for a long moment. "Do we?" April hesitated, setting her cup down. "I'd like to think so." He wanted to believe it too. But the question that had been sitting on his tongue for weeks finally slipped out. "Why didn't you say goodbye?" April froze. "Ben, I mean back then. Graduation night. You just..." He stopped himself, his voice tight. "You walked away like I didn't matter." She closed her eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "By breaking me?" "By letting you go," she said quietly. "You had your dream job waiting. I had mine. I thought if I made it clean, you wouldn't follow me and give up everything you'd worked for. You didn't even give me the choice." April looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know." and I've regretted it every day since. The room went still. Emily's quiet humming filled the space between them. Benjamin exhaled slowly, the anger in his chest fading into something softer, heavier. You can't just show up 20 years later and fix it. I know that too, she said, but I can try not to run this time. He looked at her, eyes searching. For once, there was no sarcasm, no shield of humor. Just two people standing in the debris of what they used to be. Emily chose that moment to look up and proudly declare, "Look, the moon house is done." Benjamin smiled, breaking eye contact. "Looks great, Peanut." April crouched down to inspect it. "It's perfect," she said, and when she looked up at Benjamin, her eyes were shining, not with tears this time, but with something steadier. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe hope. That night, after April left and Emily was tucked in, Benjamin stood by the window, watching the lab lights dim across the street. He wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel so heavy. Chapter 9. Small Orbits. The day started with glitter. Benjamin should have known better. Any day that started with glitter never ended quietly. He stumbled into the kitchen to find Emily standing on a chair, proudly stirring what appeared to be an unholy mixture of pancake batter, sprinkles, and, God help him, pink glitter. "Happy birthday, Daddy," she announced. He blinked. "It's not my birthday. It's mine. So you get birthday breakfast too." Pearl sat on the counter, tail twitching like she was reconsidering all her life choices. Benjamin grabbed the whisk before the kitchen could achieve sentience. "Let's maybe not eat the glitter, Peanut." Emily sighed dramatically. "But it's sparkly. So is tinfoil. We don't eat that either." She giggled, hopping off the chair. "Miss April's coming, right?" He froze halfway to the stove. "Who told you that?" "Miss April. She said she's bringing the thing." "What thing?" "It's a surprise." Of course it was. By noon, the living room had been transformed into the kind of organized chaos only a 5-year-old's birthday could justify. Streamers, balloons, a mountain of paper crowns, and a soundtrack that alternated between children's songs and pop music Benjamin pretended to hate. The doorbell rang, and Emily sprinted for it like a missile. "She's here." April stood on the porch, balancing a bright pink rocket-shaped cake that looked like it had taken a small engineering team to construct. "Permission to dock?" she said with a grin. Benjamin laughed. "Granted. Wow, you baked this." "Don't insult me," she said. "I ordered it. But I added the sparkles." "Ah, so you're the glitter culprit." She handed him the cake and leaned in slightly. "Guilty." Their eyes met for half a second longer than necessary before Emily squealed. "It's a pink rocket." April crouched down to her level. "Princess astronauts need proper fuel for launch day." Emily hugged her. "You're the best, Miss April." Benjamin watched them, something tender stirring in his chest that he couldn't quite name. The afternoon unfolded in snapshots. Emily blowing out candles while Pearl swatted at streamers. Benjamin and April tag-teaming party games, laughing when they lost to a squad of 5-year-olds in musical chairs. April helping Emily unwrap presents. Tiny astronaut boots, a plush rocket, and a glittery tiara that she wore immediately. When the last of the guests had been picked up and the sugar crash began in earnest, Benjamin carried a half-asleep Emily to her room. She blinked drowsily as he tucked her in. "Daddy." "Yeah, Peanut. You smiled a lot today." He paused. "Yeah. Miss April makes you smile. You should keep her." He laughed softly, brushing her hair back. "I'll see what I can do." She yawned. "Good. She's pretty. I noticed." Emily giggled once, then drifted off to sleep, Pearl curling up protectively beside her. Benjamin found April in the kitchen, stacking empty cups into neat towers. She looked tired but content, her scarf draped loosely around her neck. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For today. For everything." She smiled. "You make it sound like I built the rocket." "You might as well have. You made her year." April shrugged, her gaze soft. "She makes it easy. So do you." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space. Finally, April spoke. "You know, I used to imagine what it would have been like if we hadn't gone our separate ways. I'd picture a house like this, the smell of pancakes in the morning, a cat that only listens to one person." Benjamin smiled. "You forgot the glitter." She laughed quietly. "Right? Glitter everywhere. I'd always tell myself it was just fantasy, that real life doesn't work like that. But standing here, it feels close." He looked at her, something breaking open inside him. "April." She stepped closer, just enough for him to feel the warmth between them. "I don't want to be a fantasy anymore, Ben. I want to try for real this time." He didn't move, didn't breathe. The words settled over him like snow, soft and dangerous. "You don't have to answer," she whispered. "Just think about it." She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist gently. "April." She looked back, eyes wide. "Stay? Just for a little while." Her smile was small and trembling. "Okay." They sat together on the couch, the quiet comfortable now. The TV played softly in the background, some nature documentary Emily had fallen asleep to. April leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Benjamin felt the edges of his world align. He didn't know what came next, love, heartbreak, or something in between, but in that small orbit, in that moment, it didn't matter. The stars could wait. Chapter 10. The Things We Build. For 2 weeks, Benjamin let himself believe life had found a rhythm again. Mornings were filled with Emily's chatter and burnt toast. Afternoons with laughter echoing through the lab, as April joined them for testing, and evenings with quiet moments that hovered just shy of something more. He didn't ask what this was between them, maybe because naming it would make it real, and real things could break. But everything that settled into place had a way of shifting when you weren't looking. It started with a knock on the lab door late one afternoon. April stood there with her tablet hugged against her chest and an unreadable look in her eyes. "Hey," Benjamin said, glancing up from the prototype schematic. "You look like someone just told you we're out of coffee." She smiled faintly. "Worse, actually. Impossible." She hesitated before answering. "The board offered me a promotion." He blinked. "That's good news, isn't it?" "Maybe." She took a breath. "It's in Chicago." The silence that followed was sharp enough to hurt. "How long?" he finally asked. "It's permanent." Benjamin leaned back against the table, the words sinking like stones. "I see. They want me to head up corporate development for the entire division," she said quickly. "It's everything I worked for." "Of course it is. But..." She met his eyes. "It means leaving the project." "Leaving?" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. "Leaving us," Benjamin said quietly. April's voice softened. "Ben, I don't want to go, but I can't ignore what I've worked toward for years." He nodded slowly, jaw tight. "You shouldn't. You've earned it." "That's not what I wanted you to say." "What do you want me to say, April? That you should turn it down? That you should stay here because Emily likes you, and I..." He stopped himself, exhaling hard. "You have to live your life." Her eyes glistened. "And what about yours?" "I already made my choice," he said quietly. "For years ago." The words hung between them, heavy and honest. Later that night, Emily noticed the difference right away. April had stayed for dinner, but was quieter than usual, pushing peas around her plate, while Benjamin kept his eyes on his food. Emily looked from one to the other, frowning. "You're both doing the quiet thing again." Benjamin forced a smile. "Just tired, Peanut." "You only get quiet when you're sad," she said matter-of-factly. April's voice wavered slightly. "We're okay, sweetheart." Emily stared at her. "You don't sound okay." April blinked rapidly, the facade crumbling. Benjamin reached across the table, his hand brushing hers in silent reassurance. But Emily wasn't fooled. "Are you going away?" Emily asked suddenly. April froze. "Who told you that?" "Nobody," Emily said softly. "I just heard you say Chicago." Benjamin sighed. "She got offered a new job, Peanut." Emily's lip trembled. "But you can't go? Who's going to help me build rockets?" April stood, kneeling beside her. "Oh, sweetheart. Even if I go, I'll still see you. I'll visit, I promise." "That's what people say before they don't come back." The words landed like a gut punch. April looked stricken, tears shining in her eyes. "I'm not leaving you, Emily." "Then stay." Benjamin said gently. "It's not that simple." "It should be," she cried, little fists balled up. "I don't want another person to go away." The room went still. Even Pearl, who had been eyeing the roast chicken with predatory patience, froze mid-stalk. Benjamin knelt down beside them, pulling Emily close. "Hey," he whispered. "Nobody's going anywhere tonight, okay? We're all right here." Emily sobbed quietly into his shoulder, and April's hand brushed Emily's hair as if she were afraid the touch might break her. When Emily finally drifted off to sleep on the couch, Benjamin stood and faced April. "She's still scared," he said softly. "Every time someone leaves, she thinks it's forever." April nodded, her own eyes wet. "I didn't mean to upset her." "I know." They stood in silence for a long time before Benjamin finally spoke again. "I'm not going to ask you to stay, April." She looked up. But I can't pretend I don't want you to." April closed her eyes, fighting a trembling smile. "You really know how to make a goodbye hard." He stepped closer, close enough to feel her breath. "Then don't make it one." The next few days passed in quiet limbo. April continued to show up for work, helping Benjamin finalize the latest prototype, but their conversation stayed firmly professional. They moved around each other carefully, like two magnets hovering between attraction and retreat. It wasn't until Friday that something shifted again. Emily was in the lab's break room coloring while Benjamin and April tested the latest wheelchair control algorithm. The AI assistant's voice chirped. "Hello, Benjamin. Would you like to continue?" He groaned. "I swear it's starting to sound judgmental." April laughed. "Maybe it's picking up on your tone." They shared a smile, small, real, and something fragile between them seemed to realign. When the final test completed successfully, Benjamin threw his hands up in victory. "It works." April grinned, clapping her hands. "See? I told you." Emily jumped up from her coloring. "Did you win?" Benjamin scooped her up. "We did, Peanut. Team Space Station for the win." Emily squealed, and even Pearl meowed approvingly from her perch. For that moment, it didn't matter what city was calling, or how far away the future might pull them. They were together, and that was enough. That night, April sat in her car outside Benjamin's house, hands gripping the steering wheel. The offer letter was still on her passenger seat, unsigned. Her phone buzzed with a message from the board. "Decision needed by Monday." She looked toward the glowing window, where laughter echoed faintly, Benjamin's deep and steady, Emily's bright and untamed. April closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she didn't know whether chasing her dream meant moving forward or leaving everything that truly mattered behind. Chapter 11. The distance between stars. The sky over Maplewood had been heavy all morning, a pale gray canvas threatening rain. Benjamin had been staring at the same line of code for 20 minutes, willing it to behave. It didn't. The new AI prototype had passed every lab test, but the external beta unit, a chair built for public demonstration, was misfiring its left motor. A small thing, technically, but a small thing at the wrong moment could undo 2 years of work. And maybe that was why his hands were shaking. April hadn't been in for 2 days. She'd said she needed time to think, which Benjamin understood was code for time to say goodbye. He couldn't blame her. She'd earned this promotion. She'd fought for it. But it didn't stop him from missing her voice echoing through the lab, or the way she made even the dullest progress reports sound like adventure. He was halfway through a particularly stubborn patch of debugging when Emily patted in, clutching Pearl like a small, fuzzy security blanket. "Daddy, Pearl says you need help." He smiled faintly. "Does she now? She said you look sad." Benjamin rubbed the bridge of his nose. Pearl's a very perceptive cat. Emily climbed onto the stool beside him. "You miss Miss April." He looked at his daughter's wide, knowing eyes and sighed. "Yeah, I do." "Then you should tell her." "It's not that simple." Emily tilted her head. "You always say that. But maybe it is." She patted his arm, serious as a judge. "Miss April listens to you. You just have to talk louder." Before Benjamin could reply, his phone buzzed, an alert from the lab systems monitor. "Critical malfunction detected. Test unit offline." His stomach dropped. Oh no. An hour later, Benjamin was in the lab with his sleeves rolled up, surrounded by disassembled circuits and an AI unit that had decided to mimic a very expensive paperweight. Of all the days, he muttered, tracing the damaged control wire. He heard the door open behind him and didn't look up. "We're closed for miracles. Come back later." "I brought one anyway," came April's voice. Benjamin turned. She was there, hair pulled back, no makeup, rain on her coat. "Hi," she said softly. "Emily called me." He blinked. "She what?" "She said the space station was in trouble." He groaned, but couldn't help smiling. "I'm going to have a talk with that kid about boundaries." April smiled back. "She gets that from you." She set her bag down beside him, crouching to look at the open panel. "What happened?" "Motor burned out mid-test. The failsafe didn't trigger." "Can you fix it?" "Not in time for Monday's presentation." "Then we fix it together." He looked at her, the familiar ache returning. "You should be in Chicago." "I'm exactly where I need to be." For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then they got to work. Hours passed in a rhythm of quiet focus. The sound of tools clicking, wires reconnecting, the low hum of electricity when the circuit finally stabilized. They didn't talk about the promotion or the distance waiting for them. Instead, they talked about everything else. Old college stories, inside jokes, half-remembered lyrics from songs they used to play while studying. When Benjamin powered the chair on and the lights blinked green, he exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. "It's alive," he said. April grinned. Dr. Cook and his monster. He laughed, then caught her gaze and froze. She was close, so close he could see the faint reflection of the console lights in her eyes. "I didn't sign it," she said quietly. "Sign what?" "The contract." "April, I couldn't," she continued, voice trembling. "I thought about everything I wanted. The title, the salary, the recognition. And then I thought about this. You, Emily, this lab, what we're building. It's not just machines, Ben. It's people. It's family." He swallowed hard. "You'd give all that up?" She smiled through her tears. "I'm not giving it up. I'm choosing something better." The words hit him like sunlight after years of rain. He reached out, his hand brushing her cheek. "You sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything." For a moment, the rest of the world disappeared. There was just the hum of the lab, the faint rain tapping on the windows, and the weight of 2 decades finally lifting. Then the door burst open. "Did you fix it?" Emily shouted, barreling into the room with Pearl trotting behind her. Benjamin laughed, stepping back. "Yeah, Peanut. We fixed it." April crouched to Emily's level, smiling through happy tears. "We did it together." Emily looked between them, her grin wide and knowing. "See, Daddy? I told you. You just had to talk louder." Benjamin laughed, sweeping her up into his arms. "Yeah, you did, didn't you?" April reached out to tickle Emily's side, and the little girl squealed, the sound filling every corner of the lab. Benjamin looked at them. April, Emily, even Pearl glaring from her perch, and thought, this was what he'd been building all along. Not circuits, not machines, a life. That night, after the rain stopped, Benjamin walked April to her car. "So," he said, "what happens now?" April smiled, eyes crinkling. "Now, we see where the gravity takes us." He chuckled. "You and your space metaphors. You started it." They stood there for a long moment, the air cool and clean after the storm. Finally, Benjamin said, "Stay for dinner?" April's smile deepened. "Only if there's glitter-free pancakes. No promises." They both laughed, the sound soft and full, and when she leaned up to kiss him, just a small, hesitant, perfect kiss, it felt less like the start of something new and more like coming home. Epilogue, launch day, the sun rose lazy and gold over Maplewood, glinting off the glass facade of the new Cook Morse Research Center. The name gleamed in brushed steel above the entrance, a name that carried memory and purpose in equal measure. Inside, the air hummed with quiet excitement. Engineers moved briskly between workstations, journalists set up cameras, and at the center of it all stood Benjamin Cook, suit jacket off, tie already loosened. He had long ago accepted that no amount of prep could keep a launch day perfectly tidy, whether for a product or for life. Dad. He turned just in time for Emily to skid to a stop beside him, ponytail slightly lopsided, lanyard bouncing. She was 9 now, somehow a hurricane in sneakers and kindness. Guess what? She said, breathless. What? They're putting your name on the big screen. It says, Benjamin Cook, chief designer and proud girl dad. Benjamin laughed. They really put that last part. Miss April said it was mandatory. He glanced toward the stage. April stood near the podium, clipboard in hand, directing people with the same blend of grace and command that had always both impressed and terrified him. She caught his gaze across the room and smiled. He smiled back, the memory of that first conference, awkward, bruised, and full of unsaid things, feeling like a lifetime ago. An hour later, the demonstration began. The new mobility AI, Project Horizon, was more than a wheelchair this time. It was an adaptive system, part robotic exoskeleton, part smart interface, designed to give freedom back to people who'd had too much of it taken away. When the prototype glided across the stage with smooth precision, the crowd erupted in applause. Benjamin barely heard them. He was watching April. She was clapping too, but her eyes were on him, shining in that quiet, knowing way that said everything words couldn't. After the presentation, the three of them slipped away to the rooftop terrace, their small tradition after every major milestone. Emily leaned on the railing, eyes wide at the sprawl of the city below. Do you think Mom and Dad can see us from up there? Benjamin swallowed, following her gaze toward the horizon. I think they can. April reached for his hand. He took it. Emily grinned up at them. So, when are we building the space rocket? April laughed. Still on about that, huh? Obviously. Princess astronauts have to explore. Benjamin knelt beside her. Maybe someday, Peanut. But you know what the first rule of space travel is? Emily's eyes sparkled. What? Never go alone. She smiled, leaning into his shoulder. Then we'll go together. April crouched down beside them, wrapping her arms around them both. Deal. For a long moment, the three of them just stayed there, watching clouds drift by, wind playing with Emily's hair, the city alive beneath them. It wasn't perfect. Life never was. But it was good, and it was theirs. Benjamin looked at April, at Emily, at the world he'd once thought he'd lost, and smiled. You know, he said, for a guy who didn't plan on being a dad. April raised an eyebrow. You're doing all right. He grinned. Best decision I never made. Emily giggled, and April kissed his cheek, whispering, You're not half bad at this love thing either. The wind carried their laughter into the wide, open sky. And somewhere above, maybe in the quiet between stars, Deborah and Jackson smiled too. The end.